gentlemen, there comes a time in your life when you begin to realize that it wasn't just a coincidence. You started second-guessing yourself right when you were about to step into something greater. That the shaking of your confidence didn't start in the valley. It started when the mountain came into view. You thought it was just self-doubt. You thought it was just anxiety. You thought it was just one of those seasons where nothing seemed to align. But what you were really experiencing was an attack on the very thing that opens doors, shifts rooms, and breaks generational curses, your confidence. Because confidence isn't arrogance. Confidence is rooted in knowing who you are, even when everything around you is trying to redefine you. Confidence is the language of heaven spoken in the midst of chaos. It's the reminder that you were never ordinary, and the way you carry purpose cannot be camouflaged, no matter how hard you try to blend in. You ever notice that the attack didn't come when you were hiding? It came when you were glowing. It came when you started dreaming again. It came when you dared to believe that you were more than the trauma, more than the divorce, more than the bankruptcy, more than the diagnosis. The moment you started lifting your head and walking like someone who knew they were chosen, that's when the resistance came. Because confidence makes you dangerous. It makes you hard to manipulate, hard to silence, hard to tame. Confidence is the currency of calling, and the moment you start spending it, walls fall, patterns break, chains drop. But if you start to believe the whispers that say you're not ready, not worthy, not capable, then you'll never even knock on the doors you were born to walk through. So what better way to stop someone than to make them believe they have no reason to start? That's why I hit you in your identity. That's why I hit you in your self-esteem. It was never about what you did. It was always about what you carry. There is a version of you that terrifies the darkness, a version of you that, if fully unleashed, will set entire families free, a version of you that isn't afraid to speak truth, to stand tall, to show up whole. But in order to meet that version of you, you have to believe you're allowed to be heard. You have to believe you're worthy of the room, worthy of the mic, worthy of the love, worthy of the calling. And that's where the attack began. It didn't want you to believe you could heal, so it sent people to remind you of your scars. It didn't want you to believe you could lead, so it echoed every failure louder than your victories. It didn't want you to stand, so it convinced you to shrink, to settle, to stay small. But baby, you were never called to fit in. You were called to rise, and rising requires confidence. It leads you. You see, your confidence is a weapon. When you walk in it, you don't have to announce who you are. Your presence does it for you. Your confidence doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're aligned. It means you understand that your worth isn't tied to your performance. It's tied to your identity. That's why the hits were so personal. That's why it came through people you trusted, places you loved, words you once believed. It was never random. It was strategic. Because if it could get your confidence, it could keep your calling on mute. But look at you, still breathing, still showing up, still dreaming in spite of disappointment, still speaking in spite of the silence, still becoming even though the process is slow and the nights are long. That tells me one thing. Your confidence may have been shaken, but it wasn't stolen. Are you ready to step into that? Confidence was attacked because it's connected to your calling. You weren't targeted randomly. This wasn't about your personality, your style, or even your mistakes. It was always about the deeper thing, your calling, that unique assignment on your life that no one else can fulfill the way you can. And confidence is the access point. It's the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. That's why it came under fire, because if your confidence can be broken, your calling can be delayed. And delaying your calling means delaying the healing, the change, the breakthrough you were born to spark in others. There's something dangerous about a person who knows who they are. When you know who you are, you stop settling. You stop entertaining distractions. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. And the moment you step into that awareness, your steps become ordered. Your voice carries weight. Your life becomes a signal to others that freedom is possible. But if you doubt your own value, you'll keep asking for permission in rooms you were built to lead. You'll keep second-guessing the gifts you were already qualified to carry. You'll forfeit opportunities because fear convinced you that you're not ready. That's how it works. Not through destruction, but through disbelief. If confidence is a door to calling, then doubt is the lock that keeps it shut. Confidence. And isn't it strange how the confidence attacks often come wrapped in familiarity? A word from someone you trusted, a rejection that shook you deeper than it should have, a moment that made you question not just your ability, but your identity. It wasn't just about that moment. It was about what that moment interrupted. Momentum, growth, purpose, destiny. Because when you start walking in confidence, things start aligning. The right people find you. The right doors open. Ideas flow. Peace shows up. Your spirit recognizes where it belongs, and your past no longer dictates your future. You start showing up with authority, not because you've figured everything out, but because you know you were sent. And sent people walk differently. They don't need to prove. They just need to move. That's what confidence gives you, movement. It breaks the paralysis of fear. It tells the shame to sit down. It reminds the little girl or boy inside of you that you're no longer stuck in the place that tried to break you. And when you move in confidence, even if you stumble, you fall forward, you grow into the thing you thought was too big for you. You rise into the version of yourself that God always saw, even when you didn't. This is why it was never just about keeping you sad or anxious or confused. It was about disconnecting you from the belief that you were chosen, because chosen people carry responsibility. They create shifts. They carry light. They change rooms. And a confident, chosen person is a threat to systems that thrive on silence, fear, and compliance. But your confidence wasn't attacked because you were weak. It was attacked because you're strong. Because your voice changes things. Your presence challenges norms. Your obedience will release blessings, not just for you, but for generations. If that confidence ever fully settles in your spirit, there's no telling what you'll build, break, or birth. You may not have all the steps, but if you hold on to your confidence, you'll find your stride. Because the calling hasn't left, it's just been waiting for you to believe you're worthy of walking in it. And the moment you do, the attack loses its power. The attack intensified when you started rising, not when you were hiding. It didn't come for you when you were buried in shame. It didn't come for you when you were silent, uncertain, or playing small. The pressure didn't show up while you were doubting your worth, living beneath your potential, or pretending you were fine while secretly breaking inside. No, the resistance showed up the moment you decided to rise. When you lifted your head and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more for your life than survival. That maybe healing wasn't a fantasy. That peace wasn't just for other people. That purpose could find you even after everything you've been through. And isn't it wild how the moment you took that first step toward wholeness, the fire came? The doubts grew louder, the warfare intensified, the voices around you got quieter or harsher. The things that used to feel certain started shaking. It's almost like life was easier when you were hiding, because hiding doesn't threaten anything. Hiding doesn't shake foundations. Hiding doesn't push back against the narrative that says you'll never be more than your past. But the moment you stood up and decided you would no longer live bound by fear, rejection, or insecurity, that's when everything seemed to turn on you. Not because you were doing something wrong, but because you were doing something right. Rising disrupts patterns. It breaks cycles. It signals to the spiritual realm that someone has remembered who they are. And when a person remembers who they are, they become dangerous to everything that was assigned to keep them small. It's not coincidence. It's confirmation. The chaos didn't begin in the valley. It started when the summit came into view. The resistance wasn't punishment. It was proof. Proof that your steps were aligning with something greater. Proof that your voice started carrying weight. Proof that you began to walk with purpose instead of pain. And the moment you shifted from victim to victor, the atmosphere noticed. Because rising doesn't just elevate you. It exposes everything connected to you. It shows you who's really for you. It reveals the parts of you still healing. It demands new habits, new thinking, new faith. And that's not easy. It's stretching. It's uncomfortable. But it's necessary, because you can't rise with a mindset rooted in survival. You need vision. You need resilience. You need confidence. You become the reminder that healing is possible, that purpose is real, that boldness is holy, and every space you step into starts to feel different, not because of what you're wearing, not because of your resume, but because you walk in as someone who refuses to dim their light. You show up as someone who has learned that humility and confidence can coexist. You don't have to tear yourself down to be approachable, and you don't have to play small to be accepted. There's a divine power in knowing that your confidence is not for you alone. It's part of your ministry. It's part of your testimony. It's part of how people experience the truth that you don't have to have it all together to be impactful. You just have to believe that who you are is enough, that what you've been given is more than enough, that what's inside of you is bigger than what's coming against you. And when you truly believe that, your steps become bolder, your words become clearer, your boundaries become firmer. You no longer ask for permission to take up space. You walk like someone who understands they are the assignment, that what you bring can't be duplicated, that your story, your insight, your perspective carries weight, that you don't have to strive to be seen because you're already seen by the one who called you. And when that kind of confidence shows up, atmospheres break. The silence is interrupted. The room begins to adjust itself around the power you carry. And it's not because you're loud, it's because you're anchored. Anchored in identity. Anchored in purpose. Anchored in the understanding that you are not what you've been through, but what you've overcome. That's what makes you dangerous. Because when you walk in confidence, you don't just shift rooms, you shift legacies. You shift bloodlines, you shift conversations, you shift patterns. You show others what it looks like to stop playing small and start walking tall. Not in pride, but in purpose. Not in fear, but in faith. And that shift, that's where the real change begins. You don't need perfection to walk in purpose, just persistence. It's easy to believe the lie that you have to have it all together before you begin, that purpose is reserved for the polished, the prepared, the people who never mess up, never stumble, never question. But the truth is, most of the people walking boldly in their purpose are doing it with trembling hands. They're not fearless, they're faithful, they're not perfect, they're persistent, because purpose doesn't require perfection. It requires a heart that refuses to. Some of the most powerful moments in your life will happen when you feel the least qualified, when you're showing up with tears in your eyes, still healing from the very thing you're helping others overcome, when you're leading while bleeding, when you're stepping out unsure, uncertain, but still moving. That's where purpose lives, in the tension between your imperfection and your obedience. You'll miss it if you think purpose starts when everything is neat and clean. Purpose shows up in the middle of the mess. It finds you when you're still unsure, when you're still growing, when you're still trying to figure out if you're even worthy of the call. But the fact that you care, the fact that you're still trying, still hoping, still showing up, that's the sign you're already walking in it. Persistence is what activates what perfection cannot, because perfection is a moving target. Every time you think you've arrived, the bar moves, but persistence, that's steady. It says, even if I don't feel ready, I'm still going. It says, even if I fail, I'll learn and try again. That kind of spirit scares the systems that depend on your fear to keep you quiet. It pushes through shame. It keeps climbing when others give up. That's the power of persistence. It's not glamorous, but it's unstoppable. You'll learn more by doing than by preparing to do. Some doors won't open until you start walking. Some confidence won't grow until you move while still feeling insecure. And some healing won't happen until you trust that your broken pieces can still bless somebody else. You don't have to wait until you feel whole to show up. You just have to trust that God can use the parts of you you're still working on. And isn't that what grace is? That you can be becoming and still be effective. That you can be working through your story and still be called to tell it. That you can be unsure and still be anointed. We've been tricked into thinking that visible struggle disqualifies us from purpose, when really it's what makes us relatable. Your authenticity carries more weight than your perfection ever could. So, if you're waiting for the moment where everything feels right before you begin, stop waiting. Start where you are with what you have, as you are, because there's someone waiting on the other side of your yes, not your perfection. They don't need you to be flawless. They need you to be real. They need to see what it looks like to walk through fire and still show up. They need to know that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up again and again. Perfection will make you perform. Persistence will keep you authentic. One drains you, the other builds you. Choose persistence. Choose to keep showing up even when your voice shakes, even when the outcome is uncertain, even when you're tired or disappointed or tempted to give up. Because every time you persist, you build endurance. Every time you keep going, you strengthen your faith, and eventually that persistence becomes your rhythm. You'll look back one day and realize it wasn't the perfect days that got you to where you are. It was the days you almost gave up but didn't. It was the moments you kept moving, even if it was just one small step. That's how purpose is fulfilled. Not in perfection, but in the quiet, courageous persistence to keep going anyway. Your growth doesn't need an announcement. Your fruit will speak for itself. You don't have to prove that you've changed. You don't have to convince anyone that you've healed. Growth isn't about making noise. It's about producing fruit. And real fruit doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It simply shows up in time, undeniable, tangible, and true. That's why the loudest ones often have the least to show, because when you're really growing, you're too focused on becoming to be explaining. You see, there's a season where God works in silence. A season where He doesn't announce what He's doing in you, because He's more concerned with your roots than your reach. He wants you anchored before you're elevated. He wants you whole before you're handed the platform. And sometimes that means your process is hidden. It's misunderstood. It's quiet. But that doesn't mean it's not working. Just because it isn't public doesn't mean it isn't powerful. There's something sacred about silent seasons, seasons where you're healing behind the scenes, breaking cycles in private, saying no to old patterns when no one is watching. It may not look like much from the outside, but inside everything is shifting. Your mind is being renewed, your confidence is being rebuilt, your standards are rising, and soon the fruit will show, not because you forced it, but because it was inevitable.